Hey everybody, welcome to the very, very first edition of the 80s Still Scream. I'm Leonel VHS. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited that I'm finally getting to do this. You guys have no idea how long I've been wanting to put something like this together, and I'm so happy that it's finally going to happen. How is everybody? I've got my good friend, writer for Shock to You Drop, Fangoria, Delirium Magazine, and now he's got his own website, Motorcycle. I got Jerry Smith here. Jerry, what's up? I'm so happy you're here.
How's it going? I'm very excited to do this.
Cool. I'm so excited that you're sitting here in front of me. We are here to talk 80s. 80s slashers, 80s horror. This show is dedicated to how I got started, how you got started, because everybody has their own little story about how they got into horror, how they started out, what movies got them going. You know, me, in my case, I have a weird story. Actually, my father was the one that actually accidentally got me into horror without even knowing. He accidentally played a joke on me, thought it was going to get me away from horror, and it backfired. So let's talk about, talk to me about how you got started. Like, what were your influences? What got you started?
It's an interesting story. My mom was married to this man from India, Bombay, India, that was really obsessed with American culture. He wanted to kind of soak in every popular film at the time, especially if they were like Oscar-nominated things. But even like the genre films he was super into. And he would take us to the movie theaters and show us these movies that we really had no business watching at the time. Like I remember going opening night to see Die Hard and Child's Play and all of these. But before getting into that stuff, the one thing that kind of really set me off on the path that I've been my whole life with the genre is he took my brother and I to see The Accused, that movie with Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster, yeah.
And I was a little kid, and that movie's about this woman that got gang raped.
Yeah.
So it's like the worst thing you could do. And that night, was the night that, I started getting abused as a child and like really awful things. And a way to kind of get away from that, we lived by a theater, and my mom, who was a nurse at the time, she would give us enough money to stay in the theater basically from when she went to work to when she got home. So, and this is way before, Columbine, which kind of made people start carding everyone and stuff. So back then, if you had a note from your parents, you could watch whatever. So I was a little kid in the theater from opening to close watching whatever was there. And I remember, like, it was like, the latest Halloween, the latest Nightmare on Elm Street. All of those films were, like, the ones that really just I was able to latch onto. Because more than dramas, more than comedies, more than anything, the horror genre, even as a little kid, going through kind of that abuse that I was going through as a kid, those were the films to where you could, follow this protagonist and go on this kind of journey with them and kind of live vicariously through, the Laurie Strodes, the Jamie Lloyds, all of those people, who would have to confront these, slashers or confront, demons or monsters or whatever, and they'd usually come out ahead. And as a kid, that just really triggered an obsession in me that, I've been in love with the genre ever since. I say this and people joke, but I hold the horror genre, just as close to my heart as my children.
Yeah.
So.
And that's funny how you say that, because mine was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Mine, what happened with me was that it was the early 80s. Mm-hmm. Dad wanted a brand new television set.
Yeah.
He took us to Fresno one day. We were out this mom and pop. And as we were looking around the store, I wandered around and I saw this big poster on the other side of the store for all these things that Paramount had put out. All these movies. Like different, just different pictures of different covers. And for me, Friday the 13th, the artwork just caught my eye. Mm-hmm. I remember I was probably about 7, 8 years old, and I was staring at it, and I was mesmerized by how beautiful that artwork is.
Yeah.
And Dad ended up buying a TV. He ended up buying a video disc player. I know I'm taking it way back, video disc. And at the time, when we bought it, there was a special going on where when you purchased one, you got 3 free movies as an incentive for buying it. So Pop was like to own, yeah, to take home with you.
That was during the time where like movies were like what, $70, $80?
$80 bucks a piece.
Okay,
so Dad took advantage of it and said, okay, hey, go look around and see what you guys want to find. Mm-hmm. So everybody looked around. Dad picked up a couple cartoons for the kids. He got himself Dr. No because he was a big James Bond fan at the time. And I pointed out to him that I wanted this movie. And he looked at me, looked at the picture I was pointing at, looked at me again, and he said, "Are you sure you want this?" And I said, "Yes." I had this thing where I had to have it. Did not know what the movie was about, what was in it or anything. I just had to have it. So Dad thought he was going to be funny and told the guy behind the counter or whatever, said, "Hey, bring me out this movie and show me what this video disc player can do." So the guy was like, "Okay." So he takes the video disc, pops it into the player, turns on the TV, and there I am, 7, 8-year-old kid, with the first 5 minutes of this movie playing while Dad and him were trying to make a deal. And I'm seeing, Barry and Claudette getting slaughtered. And it gets up to the part where Annie gets her throat slashed. I'm there frozen. I cannot move. I'm absolutely terrified. And Dad is all like, "So you ready? You want to take this home?" I'm all like, no. I had no idea what that was. So I was already terrified beyond belief. We get home. He puts it on and makes us sit through the whole thing. Dude, I spent the rest of the night crying my eyes out. I was terrified. Completely terrified. He thought he was going to be like, "Okay, I'll take this home. I'll teach him a lesson that he'll never touch horror again." And it was the end of that.
And that was the first Friday 13th?
The very first one. Okay. Yeah. It was like the summer of 83 when all this was going on. Little did he know, and I didn't even know at the time, really, he had planted this really bizarre little seed in me. And from then on, there was this curiosity that I could not squash or get rid of. And from there, that's kind of how it went on. It started there. We ended up moving to Texas in 84. And this was the time when video stores were popping up on every corner. I mean, where we lived in the Rio Grande Valley, Texas. Hot. You didn't really think stuff like that was really popular. But there were literally video stores on every corner. Gas stations had little video rental spots where you could rent. Grocery stores had them. Pharmacies had them. You could not walk anywhere without seeing video cassettes. So what does this kid do? I start getting curious and start looking at boxes, VHS boxes. Oh, my obsession with VHS boxes. Every time we went shopping, I would split off from my parents. I would go to the horror section, and I would just stare at this stuff, not knowing that I really wanted to start watching these, because to an extent I was terrified. I mean, I was horrified. And thanks to Dad, that summer later where he ended up watching Friday 1, Friday 2 came on Halloween. So he stayed up to watch it and had it on really nice and loud so I could hear it in the next room and be terrified, because he thought that was the funnest thing, to see me under my covers crying. About a year later, my buddy Valentine came on late night once. He stayed up to watch it. That's kind of where I got my start. He liked these movies, and for him it was a fad. But I don't think he knew that I was going to take off and run with it. So here I spent my early teenage years in video stores everywhere. Everywhere we went, I was hitting the video section, looking at the horror films. And then, when I was a teenager, the boy next door we lived, his older brother had, he was the manager of a grocery store in Westlaco, Texas, Valley Mart. Never forget it. And I started doing stuff in secret. I was so curious about these movies, and I was really good friends with them. And it got to the point where I would go to the store, because my parents frequented it. I would see movies I wanted. I would tell his older brother, "Hey, bring home this movie." So I spent a lot of time at their house. My parents, my siblings had no idea what I was really doing. Some of the movies scared me. Some of them terrified me. Some of them were bad, like really bad. But there was this curiosity and this fascination I was beginning to have with them. And from there, it just absolutely took off.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about the horror genre. I mean, if you think of like comedies and dramas and period pieces and stuff, there really isn't that much. There isn't that level of kind of like a game. Like I remember being a kid going to the video stores and seeing all those boxes, and some of them, like you said, were terrifying, and some of them weren't. But a lot of those boxes, the artwork was so striking that, especially with the horror genre, it was always like a game of like, okay, is this movie going to live up to its box art?
Oh my God!
I remember there are certain films that the artwork to this day confuses me, because I remember being a kid going into my local store and seeing like the cover of Evil Dead 2 and thinking it was going to be like the scariest movie of all time, or seeing the cover, which this was in the horror section too, which I don't know why, but the cover of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, the lip.
Yeah, and I was thinking, oh my god, this is gonna be like a bloody, just gnarly time. And so like my dad rented it for me, and I went back and watched, I don't know, the first 15 minutes of Rocky Horror, and I was just like, no, this is not what I was expecting.
And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because my first video store was 1983. It was Ernie's Video, downtown Reedley, California. I'm even lucky enough to have a cap of that store.
Really?
It's somewhere around here. But I did the same thing. I remember walking in there for the very first time, and there were, I could see it clear as day. I saw posters for Zombie. I mean, that's one of the very first horror images I ever saw in a video store, was that poster. I'm actually looking at it right now here in my office. It scared the heck out of me.
Yeah, especially as a kid. I mean, I'm
It was
36, and that scares me.
Zombie, it was The Burning, it was Visiting Hours, Squirm. I mean, all these wonderful boxes. And you said it just right. Wondering, okay, these images are so terrifying, the film has to match it at some point.
And even there are also films that didn't kind of match the box art, but ended up being great films. I remember as a kid, for years, I refused to watch Sleepaway Camp based on the box art. I was like, this is going to be way too heavy for me.
Dear Mom and Dad, I've been at Sleepaway. Oh, heck
yeah. I mean, but the film itself is so great. It's such a great film, but I mean, that box art's kind of misleading. But the one that really stands out to me as a memory of just seeing this box art and being like, oh my god, this movie's going to be so just wonderful, is Rawhead Rex.
Rawhead Rex, the Australian film?
The Clive Barker.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I remember seeing the VHS box art, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to love this movie. And then even as a kid, I got it home, and I was just like, this is awful. Like, this is atrocious. But one question I wanted to ask you, speaking of, like, video stores and stuff, one of the local ones where I grew up in the Central Valley, every genre had its own theme. Like, you'd go into, like, the action area, and there'd be, like, a fake boulder. You'd go into the horror area, there'd be, like, a coffin, and there'd be, like, spider webs and stuff. Were there any of those?
You know, not that I remember in Texas when I was growing up, because they were so readily available everywhere.
Yeah, you can't
everywhere,
go, like, Drugs and see a coffin.
Right. Yeah. Everywhere you went, there was just, like, a shelf, and video boxes just scattered, and just placed in order. That's all we saw. When you said that, though, I remember in the early 80s, All That Video in Reedley actually had a huge horror area, and there was like a fake haunted house that was like cardboard and had all these gadgets behind it, and it would light up, and they'd have like fog behind it. It was really cool because it actually lured you to go and check that out, which was something you don't see anymore, period. So one of the things that I really, really loved about going and browsing through these things, like you said a minute ago, was the artwork. At the time, because I was living in a religious household, my dad was a minister, you know, really, really, really strict. Stuff like this was just absolutely not allowed.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up spending most of my youth memorizing these images, these box covers, reading synopsis left and right, because I was making plans for the future, you know, to read about this stuff. And, you know, there was kind of, in my family, you know, my parents didn't want us getting into this stuff because back in the early to mid-'80s, there was a huge, you know, satanic panic thing going on. You know, all these, you watch The Exorcist, you're going to become possessed yourself. In church, they taught us about listening to metal music and backmasking, and, you know, if you play a record backwards, it's going to get you to smoke marijuana, you know, it's going to get you to kill, you know, people, it's going to have, you're going to get demon possessed. That was the main word back then.
Everything was satanic back then. I grew up in that same stuff, and I remember, like, I was forbidden to watch The Smurfs. Because of that whole, like, credit sequence where Gargamel's, like, you know, doing his chants and the pentagram and stuff. It's like, guys, it's Smurfs. It's not like, you know, Rob Halford's not going to come out and, like, squeal, you know?
And it was everywhere at the time, and everything was, you need to be careful because this is going to happen to you. This is going to be bad. This is going to be a bad influence on you. So you can't do it. You can't read it. You can't sing it. You can't listen to it. So most of my youth was be sheltered. Like, you can't. And little did my parents know that, you know, when we went to Mexico, because we lived, you know, about 2 hours away from our grandparents. When we went to Mexico, I would always get the paper from Monterrey that would be in their little town, and I would go to the movie section. There was this huge, big spread of all these American films that had come in and, you know, were being subtitled. And that's basically where I learned a lot of these horror movie titles, a lot of these taglines, a lot of these images, and I made all these notes in my head, so when I got older, I could, seek it out and see what the heck I had been missing all this time. I mean, I look at that now and think, oh my God, all these movies that I had in my brain, I was imagining that they were so great, that they were so scary, so bloody. They were just crap.
Yeah.
How was it that these people were so worried that a movie like,
House 2.
A movie like, I don't know, like Curtains or I mean, some of them, I will say there were some of them that were a little intense, especially now grown up. Yeah. For example, I'm looking at the poster right now for Evil Speak. That's a pretty intense little film.
Yeah,
I mean, as a kid, I probably would have been like, what the hell is this? This is actually close to the real thing as you can get, because that's a pretty satanic movie. But it was so entertaining that I ended up adopting it and loving it. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that my parents were afraid of. They're like, oh, okay, well, if you guys get into this, you're gonna become I don't know, messenger or what's the one I'm looking for? Satan's gonna use you. Yeah. That was like the big thing that was preached to us as kids. And now that I look back on it, that was kind of fun. I wish I could go back to the 80s, knowing what I know now, and telling my 9-10-year-old self, dude, you're gonna be okay. Just do it. Go have fun. Enjoy it. Yeah. Enjoy. But then again, though that would have been fun, I think I wouldn't have enjoyed the film as much as I do now.
Well, I think that's what's kind of great in a lot of ways of growing up somewhat religious, is that like that fear that kind of led people like us to seek that stuff out. Like I grew up in a Baptist church pretty much my whole childhood. And they would always tell me at, like, the youth functions, oh, if you don't pray tonight, you're going to go to hell. And then the pastor would tell my dad, oh, if your son's watching horror films or listening to, metal music and stuff, do what you can to get it out of the house, even if you have to buy it off of them. So my dad would buy everything off of me. Like, okay, if you throw that movie away, I'll give you $20. So I would stock up all this money, and I would just go rebuy all this stuff for cheaper, like like the swap meet or like places like that, or like Previously Viewed, which at that time was the only way to own stuff without paying $100 a tape.
$100 a tape, yes.
It was insane. I remember like going to the video store, and a lot of them had like those huge phone book sized catalogs where you'd look through it and you'd be like, Friday 13th 4 is like $85. How am I gonna afford that? But like during the Halloween season, you'd go like Long's Drugs, and next to the costumes there'd be like, I don't know, $14, $15, maybe $20 VHSs of the Friday 13th movies. I think Paramount did that specifically.
They did that for, I think, every Halloween. They would bring them out just really quick for a couple weeks, and they were discounted. That was the one time that you would go shopping because you knew you'd be able to get them instead of paying, like you said, arm and a leg.
And you kind of spoke earlier on the artwork to Friday 13th, and I think, Halloween is my favorite film of all time. I think John Carpenter's Halloween is the best film ever made. But even with that being said, the Friday 13th series has always been just my thing. I love that franchise more than any other franchise in the world, and a lot of it is because of that artwork on all of those old VHS covers. I remember seeing those during those Halloween season, or at video stores, and just thinking like, there's something dangerous about these movies. And, watching them at the time, obviously they're not that scary, it's more just like, okay, how can we kill someone, this film. But, like, right now I'm looking at your Laserdisc of Jason Lives, and I still to this day think that's one of the best covers of any film of all time. I mean, you have, like, that, the grave, and then, the mask with, like, the lights coming out.
And, like, what you said right now, and you're absolutely right, that franchise, I hold it so near and dear to my heart because that is a franchise that got me started. Mm-hmm. I started with one, and what's funny was I didn't really watch them all, like watch them until later on when I finally decided to come out as this horror nut. Yeah. I remember getting my brother, and we started buying them. Actually, no, we started renting them. As soon as I turned 18, dude, seriously, the same week I turned 18 and got my driver's license, I went and got a video rental membership. I know that just made me sound really old. But yeah.
Do you remember how hard it was to get like a membership to like a video rental place back then?
Oh my God. And the thing was, if you had like a video rental membership, you were cool.
Yeah.
My parents, and remember back then, they used to charge you for memberships. I remember that video store I was talking about earlier, really, Ernie's video,
Mm-hmm.
it was like $40 just to be a member. So you have to pay to be a member and then pay to rent the movies.
Yeah.
But as soon as I turned 18, I went and got my membership and I started renting them one by one. And that's where I really started getting this really, like this reverence toward that whole entire series because it's what got me started. And if it wasn't for Jason Voorhees, I don't know where the hell I would be. I don't know what I would be doing. I don't know what my life would be without that being my, what do you call it? My starting point.
Gateway, yeah. And I mean, for me, there are so many huge memories in my life that are directly linked to the Friday 13th series, like yourself. I mean, the first time I ever made out with a girl was in an RV while the final chapter was in the background. So, I mean, you know, like stuff like that. I think of, you know, Crispin Glover dancing when I think of like the first time I ever kissed a girl. Or, you know,
well, that's actually funny because the awkwardness of that first kiss versus the awkwardness of that scene, right, hand in hand.
Oh, no, totally. Or like, I remember the first time that I legitimately peed my pants as a kid that was way too old to pee his pants. Was my dad used to manage a motel in Visalia called Econo Lodge, and there was a little house that was built onto the office. So we'd live in this house, and people would come and rent motel rooms, and we'd have like VCRs that they could rent to, and you know that was when the motels.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah,
that's
when the
way
motels
back.
would get the movies a little bit before they hit VHS.
Yeah.
And I remember Friday 13th Part 2 was on TV, and for some reason that was one of the ones at that time I hadn't seen at that point. And so, you know, I didn't know much about like the whole hillbilly Jason thing, 'cause the Jason I knew by then was hockey mask and everything else. And so that final scene when he leaps through the window, I just wasn't expecting that. And I think I was probably 10 or 11 at least at that time, and already into the horror genre for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Like, it was my thing. And I was just sitting there watching it, and I was like, okay, cool. You know, Jenny's okay, everything's fine. You know, Amy Steele's, she's good. And then Jason leaped through that window, and as an 11 or 12-year-old, I pissed my pants literally everywhere. And it's one of the most embarrassing things in my life. But like that, or like I said, kissing a girl, or there's so many things. It's directly linked to Friday the 13th. And I think that's another thing that's so powerful about the horror genre. And a lot of people who don't get it the way that a lot of us get it, they don't understand it. But how many people are like, you know what, I remember the first time I saw the Four Feathers. Or I remember, you know, I remember everything that I was doing when I saw A Walk to Remember.
Right?
Those genres
Exactly.
don't have that.
Exactly.
Horror
Yeah.
has that. Horror has, like, specific things. I remember an emergency meeting at my dad's church when it came out that one of the kids in my youth group saw Silent Night, Deadly Night. You know, through VHS or whatever. And I remember, you know what I mean? Like, I remember
Wow.
specific things about this genre that just, like, I look back at my life. You know, I'm in my late 30s now. I look back at my life and I just think, like, the horror genre has more memories in my life than anything. Not just other movie genres, but people. You know, there are people that have come and gone in my life. You know, I've been divorced twice. Like, horror's lasted longer than my marriages. like I said, like, this stuff is, it's kind of like air to a lot of us.
See, that's how I feel. That's why I have like a shrine dedicated to it in this one room. I rented this two bedroom place for this. You know, I had so much stuff, and I hadn't even realized how much I had collected over the years.
Yeah.
And it's so funny about collecting because I didn't start collecting, you know, until, well, let me say it this way. My father, every summer at his church, would have a revival. He would invite a pastor, minister from out of town, and he would preach for a week, you know. And there was this one week in summer, I think it was the summer of 92 or 93. He brought this guy down from, I think it was Corpus Christi, Texas, and it was, you know, normal. I played the piano in church, you know, I helped out with the services, whatever. Well, his son and I became friends. His name was Juan. Really cool guy. We talked, whatever. And one day after a service, while my parents were at Taco Bell talking to him, we were outside, and he and I got to talking, and he's like, oh, you know, I do this and I do that. I play basketball. You know, I do track in school, but, you know, I have my hobbies. I like music, whatever. But the one thing that I like that my parents don't really approve of is I have a love for horror movies. Boom. My ears stood up.
Yeah.
I was like, what? So he and I talked, and he was probably the one person that actually like reached in and brought that out of me, because for so many years I had held it secret. It was something that nobody needed to know, because I didn't want anybody thinking that, you know, there was something wrong with me because I loved him so much. But that was a turning point for me, because I became more comfortable. Like, okay, I'm not the only one who feels this way.
Yeah.
I don't
Kindred
feel so
spirits.
exactly. I don't feel so weird now, and now I can, you know, be me. And
Yeah.
that's where pretty much it started. And then little by little, I just started collecting VHS. I started collecting Laserdiscs. Started collecting posters until it was, as you can see here, out of control.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean,
So-
obviously the listeners can't see it, but yeah, this room is pretty.
So
gnarly.
tell me, I want you to tell me what do you consider like your favorite movies that got you started? Like, which ones do you remember the most? Which ones were the ones that you probably still hold on to that remind you of that time where you started out?
Let me think. Halloween 4 is a movie that, I mean, I couldn't watch the first Halloween until I was like early teens, just because it scared me too much. I mean, that the first Halloween still scares me, and people laugh at me all the time. Like, I was talking to my stepdad about it this week, and he's like, "Well, it's cheesy." Now that movie still scares the hell out of me. But Halloween 4 was the first one in that series that I just latched onto, and I was thinking, like, this is kind of a perfect film. I mean, you know, it has its little faults here and there, but as far as I'm concerned, that is what horror is to me. That, Friday the 13th Part 4, let's see, there's quite a few. Nightmare on Elm Street 4.
Oh my God,
So
Nightmare on Elm
basically
Street, yeah.
I just realized that
Friday
right
4,
now,
Nightmare on Elm Street 4,
everything
yeah,
4.
yeah.
And, you know, like, I get a lot of crap because of that. Like, people are like, oh, Halloween 4? You know? Friday the 13th 4? Nightmare on Elm Street 4?
Well, see, that's so funny you say that, because people that I meet and I talk to,
Yeah.
I tell them because you know this as well as I do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fans that have these opposing views on films.
yeah,
Oh,
they're
you know,
passionate.
yes, and I love that. One of the things I love most, and I say this to everybody I meet, one of the things I love about being a horror fan is getting to hear everybody else's opinions, because you will find no two fans that have the same taste, that have the same, oh, these are my top films, and everyone has their bottom films. And what's funny is that one man's trash, like one film that someone thinks is like a really piece of shit, is somebody else's favorite film. And I think that is so hilarious how people have such different taste levels when it comes to 80s horror.
Yeah, and everyone is extremely passionate. I mean, I've lost count of how many arguments I've gotten that I like A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 more than Dream Warriors.
Well, hello. Okay. It's funny that, because my partner and I, we
Yeah.
have that same argument all the time, because I have this infatuation with, and I've told you this before, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Oh, it's great.
And he just shits on it, and he's like, no, Dream Warriors is the best, and it
People are going to hate me for this, but I am just not a fan of Dream Warriors at all. I think it's hokey as hell. I mean, the whole movie, you're waiting for them to get their powers. They get their powers for like 10 minutes and die. Taryn is one of the most annoying characters. I'm beautiful and bad. And you
Yeah.
die in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here with that. And dude, Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I've had to defend that movie my entire life.
I defend it everywhere I go.
It is great. And you know what? I love the fact that it's kind of gotten this big resurgence because of, you know, Mark Patton kind of finally, you know, coming out in the last few years as far as like reappearing and doing conventions and that kind of stuff. But I remember growing up, that was one of those films that I would just argue to the death about, like, how could you not like A Nightmare on Elm Street 2? It has some of the best scenes in the entire franchise.
Oh, well, it doesn't follow the pattern of the first film, and
But that's
you know,
what really frustrates me. I can understand a film like Friday the 13th Part 2, where it's like, okay, did Jason take a taxi to her house at the beginning?
oh, let's not even start about that. Like, how did he know where to find her?
How did he know? I mean, how did he pay for that taxi? You know, it's I understand that. But with the second film, there really aren't any rules set with any first film of any series to where like a second one's like, oh well, you don't play by the rules.
Oh, well,
there's only one movie to go off of.
it's bullshit that, you know, Freddy's in the real world and now he's killing people. Who cares? Just have fun with it.
Exactly, and that's what it's meant to be. But you know, like you were asking about like films that really set me off and like I hold very dear. A lot of them are actually films that I didn't watch till later on in life.
That's the same way I was too.
There are films that I remember and I kind of associate my childhood with films that I didn't see until much later. There was I can't remember what release it was, but one of the releases of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the one where it's a painting and it's Leatherface kind of like, it's like dark painting. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Isn't that the third one? No, wait.
No, it's the first Texas Chainsaw movie, but it's one of the VHS releases, the artwork.
I don't remember that.
It just says the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's just like Leatherface, and it's a dark background.
Is it the one with the eyes in the background?
Yes.
Is it this one?
Let's see here. You have
right
the box.
Here? Yeah.
And there it goes. Yes. I saw that cover as a kid, and because of that, I did not watch that movie until I was 27 years old.
Okay, now that you said that, I didn't see this movie, and this is honest to God truth, until I was in my 20s. I think I was, 24, 25? My brother and I were living together for the very first time, and I don't know who or what brought up that movie, and we said, you know what, let's go out and rent this movie.
Yikes.
And we were kind of hesitant, but we brought it home, we popped it in, and I did not I was expecting to be really, 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 really terrified. Yeah. I mean, it was great, but it was not what I was expecting it to be. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. It was the opposite for me, because the first film in the series that I had seen as a kid was Texas Chainsaw 2.
Oh, great.
So my whole thing of Leatherface as a kid was like kind of this wacky Dennis Hopper being crazy, Chop Top. I mean, Bill Moseley was God to me as a kid. Anything Bill Moseley was in, I was just like, oh, he's in the Blob remake for 2 minutes? I love it. Yeah. Like, everything. Oh, he's in Pink Cadillac with Clint Eastwood for a couple scenes? I love it. So Bill Moseley was the man.
You're sounding like me regarding Zach Galligan. Anything Zach Galligan was in, I watched it. I didn't care if it stunk. Yeah. It's Zach Galligan. I'm there.
Yeah, no, totally. So I saw Texas Chainsaw 2. That was, my Leatherface growing up. So when I was 27 and I finally watched the first one, it freaked me out. Like, that movie still is it makes me extremely uncomfortable, and I think that's one of the greatest examples of a film really having that power. But, like, that cover of Texas Chainsaw, I remember the cover of, what else is it? April Fool's Day. As a kid, I saw a VHS cover of April Fool's Day. And I would not watch that movie for years because it looked absolutely terrifying. I thought somebody was going to get hung by someone's hair.
By someone's hair? Like, that. Sorry, one of the most iconic 80s posters, though. I got to give it that, yeah.
It's great. And now, having seen that movie many times, it's like, okay, it's another example of what we were talking about earlier of, like, the artwork not really showing what the movie is. And sometimes, it's a bad thing, but sometimes it's a very good thing. But films like April Fool's Day, the original Texas Chainsaw, there's so many movies that I didn't watch as a kid that I still kind of associate to being a kid and getting into the horror genre.
Yeah. It's kind of like me in my 20s when I finally started seeking out all of this stuff that I already knew about. Mm-hmm. I mean, at 11, 12, I knew about curtains. I knew about pieces. I knew about demons. But of course, I couldn't get my hands on them. And once I started doing that, it was like this whole complete different world that just opened up. And a lot of these movies were just crap. But I held on to them and I latched on to them. Come on, can we talk about Pieces? What a just horribly wonderful, shitty movie that is. And you can just see it over and over again and crack up every single time. Like something like that, watching that as a kid, I probably would not have gotten, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have gotten the wonderful irony of Linda Day George screaming bastard at the top of her lungs while kids are playing tennis in a court. It just, all that nonsense wouldn't have made any sense to me.
It's silly and it's great. And there are also films that, you might not have, understood as a kid that, as an adult you have an appreciation for. I remember there was a gas station that my dad took me into one night, and they had a video rental thing in the back of the gas station. And I saw a poster for Vamp.
Oh, it's right behind you. Yep,
that poster. Vamp. And I remember this. Yeah, I remember thinking, oh my god, that movie's going to be the scariest movie I'm ever going to watch. I will not watch that movie for a while. And then when I finally saw Vamp, I was like, okay, that's a trip, and completely different than what I thought. Grace Jones is insane.
I'm looking at Killer Party right now. I felt the same way. Now, I remember the commercial for that on TV, and it scared me. And there was a theater there in Texas. Only one theater showed it, and it showed for 2 weeks because it just totally flopped. Well, I was afraid of that movie. And finally, when I think I got the VHS off of eBay years and years later, and I said to myself, okay, I'm going to sit down and finally watch this, and it's going to scare me. It did the complete opposite. It tickled me pink, just pink. And now it's one of my all-time favorites. And I see what you're saying now. You're expecting these things to scare you, and they don't. Or you see posters for movies that are like, okay, that looks completely harmless, and it scares the living hell out of you.
Sentinel.
Yes, exactly.
I remember seeing the artwork, and I'm like, oh, it's cool, whatever. Maybe I'll give it a chance. And I saw that movie as a kid, and I was just like, okay, I will never recover from that final scene where like the real deformed people are playing these kind of demonic people.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that's extremely fucked up of the director. That's really insensitive and mean. And on the other hand, it's like that scene is one of the most terrifying scenes I've ever seen because it's so visceral and so just.
And those are the ones that are most fun. The ones that you think aren't going to freak you out, and they end up freaking you out.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one right now that scared me as a kid. House by the Cemetery scared me as a kid. Now, of course, it's not as bad. That was one of the first ones that I snuck into. Or I had I had my friend Josh sneak into, because I'd heard about it. It had played at this drive-in in Mercedes, Texas, a long time ago. Word of mouth on the playground or on the schoolyard was that movie was the scariest thing you'd ever see. It came out on video. It did scare me as a kid. It did. Now, of course, it doesn't. But it's great to hear the different movies that freaked people out here. Didn't freak people out here. Oh, I like this movie more than this one. Like, one good example was when my brother and I first rented Last House on the Left.
Oh, my Lord.
I knew of it. And I didn't even know much of it. And that's actually one that you brought up where you weren't expecting it to be.
Yeah. Oh,
that one did disturb me for a couple of weeks because we weren't expecting
and
anything.
That was even the edited version, right?
Yes.
Because the unedited wasn't available for a while.
Yeah, so we're thinking, it's going to be Wes Craven, it's going to be Nightmare on Elm Street level.
Oh, yeah.
We popped it in and we were like, okay, at first we were like, okay, this is boring. And when Krug takes the girls out to the middle of nowhere,
Makes them pee their pants.
In the words of my gay friend Oscar, shit got real. I mean, honestly, it did.
Oh, yeah.
And from then it was just downhill, roller coaster. But it ended up being one of the best movies we've ever seen because it took us by surprise and it got us by the neck and just squeezed really hard. And those are probably the best ones that I remember from getting my start. The ones that ended up scaring me more than I ever thought they would. Visiting Hours.
Yeah.
Scared me.
God, yeah. My dad made me turn that movie off about 25 minutes into it. And he was so chill on, like, any horror films, but for some reason, Visiting Hours, as a kid, he was just like, yeah, you're not watching the rest of this movie. And I don't think I finished it until I was at least 18 or 19.
And what a great movie.
Oh,
and that's one of those few movies that had it had a lot of tension in it.
Yeah.
And, well, thanks to Mr. Ironside. Can I bow down to you really quick?
Oh, it's great. I interviewed Michael Ironside for Turbo Kid a couple years ago, and I mean, growing up, Visiting Hours or obviously Total Recall and stuff like that. Like, I mean,
Scanners.
Oh my God, I remember like that was one of the only interviews I've ever done where the whole time I was like, just like complete mess. No, he's great in Visiting Hours.
And another thing that I realized later on in life was that with so many people holding these movies dear and dear to their hearts, there were actually conventions where you could go meet people, meet other horror fans, interact with horror fans, and meet these people that were in these movies.
The discovery of conventions, I have to ask you this. The discovery of conventions for you, was it as much of a profound discovery as it was for me? Because I thought I was an alien as a kid until I found my first horror.
Thank you. I thought the same thing.
Weekend of Horrors, Fangoria, like that was my tribe.
My first one was only a few years ago, and that's really surprising for a lot of people. Scaranormal in Fresno in 2000. I want to say 2004. It was either 2013.
I remember that one.
I think it was 2013. I had no idea these things existed. I had no clue. I have a cousin who's a big horror fan too, and he would tell me about going to these things where he would meet different people. He had, his family owns the last video store in this area. Like, it's fully operational. You could still rent DVDs, per day, per week, whatever. But he's got like all this memorabilia all around. He's met Heather Langenkamp. He's met Wes Craven. He's met all these different people, and it didn't really click that you could actually go to these things as a civilian per se, and meet all these people. And it wasn't until 2013 where this one here in Fresno was put up, was organized, and I bought a couple tickets. for me and my partner, we went, and it was the Piccadilly Inn. It was this little ratty little motel.
Yeah.
But Jesus, was I just overwhelmed by the presence of all these people.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to see Victor Miller. I got to see Sean Whalen. I got to see the love of my life, Felissa Rose. Hello, girl. If you're listening, I want you to come on my show. That's no joke.
Oh, she's great.
It was just amazing to be like with them and to be able to actually share my thoughts about them. Hey, Victor Miller, I swear to God, I gushed like you have no idea. I mean,
yeah.
Reality is, had it not been for Victor Miller to write Long Night at Camp Blood, I would not be sitting here talking about it right now.
Yeah.
Just his treatment for that movie that became Friday the 13th, I mean, it just completely changed everything about me.
One thing about conventions that really just knocked me on my ass was I had this kind of preconceived idea of what these people would be like. And that always scared me because, I mean, I was always kind of like a shy kid growing up. I remember going to the first Weekend of Horrors. Heather Langenkamp was there. I think Bruce Campbell was there. I mean, there was all these people that I grew up loving. And I remember being so terrified when I got there and seeing all these people at their tables and being like, okay, I cannot possibly go talk to this person because I'm going to go up there having been a fan my whole life and they're going to be completely rude because obviously, they're movie star. In my eyes at that point, they're movie stars. I'm just a normal person. They're not going to talk to me. And I remember the treatment that I got from every single person that I met completely just made me fall in love with the genre more. Because, I don't mean to continually just cap every other movie genre, but you're not going to go to a Nicholas Sparks convention.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And if you do, chances are, if you go meet Mandy Moore, she's not going to be, like, giving you hugs. It's going to be very robotic. But I remember one of the first conventions I went to, Thomas Jane was there.
Ooh.
And, I mean, I've loved that guy for years. I mean, way back to, like, Boogie Nights, or even, like, this, there's a film that's based on Neil Cassidy, the kind of beat poet, called The Last Time I Committed Suicide. It's one of my
my God, I have it on VHS.
One of my favorite movies of all time. So, it was one of the first conventions I'd ever been to, and I walked in the room, and I'm like, oh, cool, there's a table with some stormtroopers from Star Wars. Oh, cool, there's someone that looks like a robot. Cool, there's a monster. Oh, there's Thomas Jane. Oh, what? And I'm like, oh my God, there's Thomas Jane. Like, what do I do? Because at that point, I had never been starstruck, because I don't care. I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just kind of walked to his table. And then he was just by himself, no line, and signing and giving away free posters. He wasn't even charging at this convention.
Wow.
I don't even remember what it was. It might have been Comic-Con or something like that. And I was just I just froze. And he's just like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, are you having fun? And I said the first thing that popped in my head. I grabbed the poster and I go, I am now! And he just looked at me like, okay, this kid obviously is not all right in the head, so I'm just going to smile. And I just grabbed the poster and walked away. And that's only happened to me twice. To get the other one, and I'm not going to go off on this tangent because this is a quick, really funny story. The other one actually happened this year. John Carpenter is God to me. That is my religion. I will say that, and everyone that knows me knows that. I've met Carpenter a few times. There's obviously that legend that he's a real jerk, but he's been incredibly nice every time I've met him. I interviewed him once, which was a dream come true, but this time, for some reason, things just went horribly wrong for me this year. He was doing a signing of The Making of Big Trouble in Little China book. So I went with my girlfriend, and my friend Charles. Yeah, my girlfriend Alex, my friend Charles. We went and met John Carpenter at the Grove in Los Angeles. Waited in line, and out of nowhere, I just started shaking. And my girlfriend was like, what is wrong with you? Are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need, like, to sit down? Do you need some water? Are you okay? And she kept patting me back, like, you're okay? And I'm like, no, it's John Carpenter. It's John Carpenter. And I'm, like, 36 years old. And, it's the worst experience of my life. And so I started getting, like, really bad, like, really just nervous. And when I get really nervous, I have to fix things. So this is waiting in line, and I started fixing, like, all the greeting cards, like, organize them, everything. And my girlfriend goes in front of me, and she meets John Carpenter and gets a picture with them. He's incredibly friendly to her. And then it's my turn. And I walk up to him, and he looks at me, and, I obviously have a lot of tattoos. And John Carpenter looks at me with a very friendly and genuine smile and goes, man, that's a lot of ink. What's up with that? And I just froze, and I stared him down. without saying a single word. Like, stared him down like I was gonna, like, steal his lunch money. And Joan Carpenter just looks at me and goes, okay. And I just walked off. And I walked off, and I looked at my girlfriend, and, dude, she was like, cracking up, and it's the most embarrassing thing ever. But aside from that, every convention, it is such a magical experience, and that sounds really Disney and cheesy, but it's the truth. You go there, and you don't only get to meet these wonderful people that inspired you, that set you on this mission of writing or directing or producing or whatever you do, or just are in wonderful movies that you like, but you also get to meet a lot of people, like-minded fans, like-minded just individuals.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some of my best friends that I've met at conventions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are people that, I mean, like I said, it's a tribe.
Yeah, it is, actually.
You're not going to go to a Fast and Furious convention and be like, man, I made my best friend that day. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
and what's cool when you go to these, because there's so many of them now, especially where we live here in Southern California, the same people show up. So you get to see these people every now and then that let's say I met, so-and-so 2 years ago. Well, every convention I go to, they may live far away from me, but I get to see them every time these things come around. And that's a good point, that you make these friends and they stay with you.
Oh, totally. And you can make the same jokes, like, oh, did you get choked up by Kane Hodder at this convention?
Right. Oh, my God. There's this one guy that I see at every convention now, and he always asks me about Felissa Rose. And yes, before you guys even ask, I'm going to be mentioning her a lot. She's my number one. She knows it. I love her to death. And he always tells me, so have you seen Felissa yet? So have you gushed? Have you lost your lunch already? It's like, dude, really? But it's true, though. Yeah. And it's cool because when these people make repeat appearances at these conventions, they're so great, and they remember you. I mean, and it makes you feel validated as a fan. Mm-hmm. Like when I first met Felissa, she was out. I mean, I cannot tell you how great she was. When I told her how much I loved her, how much I grew up with her, what the movie did for me, she signed my T-shirt, and I fell in love with her.
Oh, she's great.
And every single time I've seen her since, she's done the same damn thing. She will get up out of her chair, come out of her table.
I've seen her do
and
that too, actually.
And she will make time. If she knows you're a real fan, she will make the time for you and put everything aside and give you that 2, 3, 4 minutes so you can walk away on cloud nine.
Oh, totally. I mean, speaking on conventions and just people like that in general, even like the smaller little events, I mean, some of those could end up being some of the most memorable things ever.
Exactly.
I mean, I still to this day, there are very few things in my life that I think about without thinking of like, man, how happy was Lionel when he met Eric Freeman?
Oh my God, let's not even talk about Eric Freeman. Okay, to everybody listening out there, this is no joke. This is not me tooting my own horn, but I will always be remembered in Eric Freeman's mind as the very first fan he ever had interaction with at a convention. Yeah. I was his first. He told me flat out when I went up to him and I met him and I gushed. I gushed.
It's funny.
That was like a dream come true because I had always wanted to meet Eric Freeman. I had always wanted to meet Robert Brian Wilson, because these are two movies that I grew up watching. Yeah. Both of you and I know Saturday Night Deadly Night was one of those movies in the 80s that was like a no-no.
Yeah.
You didn't watch it. It got banned. It got, TriStar pulled it from theaters a couple weeks afterwards.
Yeah.
And when I first started watching them, well, I have my own reasons for liking them, but we're not going to get into that. But these movies were so notorious.
Yeah.
And then you finally come across the real people that were in them, and you find out, oh my God, these guys aren't just characters. They're human beings, just like you and me.
And they're kind of bashful about it, too. Like you said, this was Eric Freeman's first thing.
Yes.
I remember I went to Tony Moran, who played Michael Myers. In the first one. I went to the first signing that he ever did. And he was just as awkward and uncomfortable as all of us were, because I remember asking me, he was like, no, I was working, I think he said something like, I was working in a grocery store. I didn't even know these things existed until this. It's a fun experience for him, too, I think.
Because you remember, Eric, he was completely shy. Like, he did not know.
Yeah.
Because then again, it was probably my fault. I came up to this guy, and I was like, full on stalker, gay. I mean, I was just all over this guy because never in my life did I ever think I was going to get to meet Eric Freeman.
Yeah.
Because he had been in seclusion for so many years. He had completely dropped acting, and he had just fallen off the face of the earth. And when he found out that, Silent Night 2, had this massive cult following, I kind of like thank him for saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to come out of hiding. Let me see what this is all about.
Yeah.
And I think I freaked him out though, because I'm serious, I was pretty bad.
Well, he retired from doing that right after.
Probably. But he was just the greatest. Like, once he kind of, like, realized what was going on, he kind of, like, came out of his shell just a little bit. And the second time I came around, because I promised the guys I was going to come back and say hi to them, he was completely different. He was so blown away by how much love people like you and I have for these movies.
Yeah.
And he, he sits there and tells me, I had no idea that you guys are so passionate about a little movie that I did just to pay the bills,
That's the thing about the horror genre. These little movies that might have been small to them are life to us.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right.
It's almost like a religious experience, turning other people onto that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to keep referencing my girlfriend this whole podcast, but I remember when we first got together, I was just like, oh, this movie, and she was like, well, I'm afraid to tell you that I've only seen the first movies in all of those series you're talking about. I'm like, and she was like, I'm sorry. No, that's great. That's great, because now we have all the time in the world for me to show you Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Thank
4,
you. I get
Skip
to mold you.
Yeah. Halloween 2, which is not as good as the first one, and why is Laurie's Michael's sister out of... Oh, I can't stand that. Hate it. Okay, but then we'll skip to Halloween 4. We'll eventually come back to 3 because it's very underrated and it's such a good movie. It's such a good experience, like, talking to other horror fans and turning them on to various different things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, telling so many people growing up that The Exorcist is great, and yeah, it's definitely a classic, but hey, let's talk about how Exorcist 3 is a much better movie.
Yeah.
Which I kind of say that just to, like, gauge people.
I kind of have the same thing when I mention Suspiria.
Yeah.
Suspiria is always a enthusiastic yes, or or a hell no. That's a movie that was, hyped up more than what it was.
Yeah.
And I get exactly what you're saying by that, and that's the good part, because like these people who don't get to see these, like for example, Alex, who hasn't seen it, it's a perfect opportunity to give them, a start on this thing, especially if they want to be a part of it. I have a cousin who many years ago said, "Hey, you know what?" He's like, "This whole horror thing that you're into, whatever." He's like, "That's like the one thing I don't know really well about you. I want to be a part of it. Fill me in." And I said, "Okay, are you being serious? Because if you are serious, I can school you." And he's like, "Give it to me." So little by little, it was, the Friday the 13th series. But more with him, though, I kind of like inserted my little love for foreign horror, like Italian giallo and stuff like that. And it was cool to get to see a newbie, per se, get such a kick out of these movies that I hold so near and dear to my heart. And with the conventions, it's the same thing. You see these people who meant so much to you in the back of your mind for so many years, and to see them in the flesh, in person, and to get that opportunity to talk to them and tell them, and especially when they take what you've told them and they have such a positive reaction to it. Like Tom Holland.
Oh, he's great.
Gushed. He was like, "Wow, you guys make me what I am. I thank you guys, because if you guys never watched my movies, I wouldn't have, basically I wouldn't have a career, and I wouldn't have this love for writing, and thankfully it's, well, I can't say I never have, because I have been in a couple of temperamental...
there are definitely, I think, some bad experiences for us all.
Yeah, there's been some, but some of them, you don't even expect them to be so great. Like, for example, I met, oh my God, I can't think of his name at the top of my head right now. The kid that played Damien in the first Omen. Oh my God,
I know
I'm so sorry that I can't remember his name right now. But he was at Monsterpalooza year before last, and for real, it was intimidating, because when I saw him, I'm like, okay, this is Damien, this evil kid that generations have grown up to, well, not so much fear, but in the film, this demonic kid, and a lot of people blame him for being afraid of kids in horror movies. Damien Thorne, thank you, that's his character. So when I approached him there at the convention, and I started talking to him about it, he thought it was the funniest thing in the world that I found him intimidating, especially him as an adult. He ended up being so great. We got to sit there and talk to him for at least 20, 30 minutes. And he told us, how it was filming, how it was to work with Gregory Peck, how it was...
Wow, that must have been nice.
It was great. And that's the best part of getting to attend these things. And I tell people, because people tell me, especially like where I work, and how is it that you get to meet all these people and get all these autographs? there's only 3 things you have to do: find out where they're at, pay for the ticket, and go. That's it. That's all you have to do.
Oh God, I already broke my rule. But my girlfriend had never been to a convention, real one, up until this year, and I was like, you know what, we got to do that. So I took her to Monsterpalooza, and it was like seeing somebody discover a lot of the stuff for the first time. Like little things that I kind of learned to kind of take for granted, because I mean, obviously at this point we've all been to like a lot of conventions. So that while it's cool at, you know, after you've been to, I don't know, 20, 30 of them or whatever, you're just like, whatever. But it was so cool seeing like another horror fan, you know, seeing Alex see someone dressed like Pinhead and he's so excited about something like that. Or seeing like, there's this guy Gear Duran who he's was it Skin Wars? Is a TV show about
Skin Wars.
He was there, and she was like, oh my god, it's Gear from Skin Wars. And being the kind of like, not jaded, but being somebody that's kind of used to it at this point, it's like, okay, well, do you want to go say hi? Do you want to get a picture? Do you want to, no. And I had to like almost force her to do it. And it kind of reminded me a lot of ways of like, you know, being in the horror community for, I mean, a while now, like, you know, writing and various things like that. You know, I've kind of gotten used to the point of like, oh, cool, I'm going to interview this person. Oh, you know, I'm going to see this movie, cool. You know, it is what it is kind of thing. And I think it kind of sucks when you get to that point, because you kind of lose that youthful kind of imagination with the genre.
Right.
And seeing somebody kind of experience that kind of stuff and kind of like see that enthusiasm, that reminded me of like all these movies, you know, all these posters I'm seeing in this room right now. It reminded me of like discovering that stuff, or, you know, meeting Bill Moseley for the first time. Which, I mean, like I said, that guy was a huge deal to me.
Yeah.
You know, meeting Bill Johnson from Texas Chainsaw 2. You know, you said Sean Whalen. I mean, People Under the Stairs is one of my favorite movies of all time. This genre, I think, is by far, in my opinion, the most important genre out there, because it doesn't just inspire people. It's not just eye candy. And again, I apologize for dissing Fast and Furious movies. A lot of people like them and make a lot of money. Okay, cool, have at it. But it's not just eye candy. You're not seeing someone drive away from a submarine.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, these movies are not only entertaining, these horror films, they're not only entertaining, but you live vicariously through them.
Yeah.
You go through these journeys. Or, like, you gravitate towards specific subgenres. I mean, you know, you like a lot of foreign horror films. I mean, I know you like slashers too. For me, slasher franchise movies and like satanic demonic horror films, I mean, those are my thing. I mean, no one's like, man, I really love the comedies of Ryan Gosling only. You know what I mean? Like, but with horror, it's like, yeah, I mostly like slasher movies.
Or I'm a big Argento head.
Oh, exactly. Or like, oh, you know, no one's like, man, I really love the Katherine Heigl romantic comedy era. Like, who cares?
Right.
You know? But, like, I've met so many people that are so obsessed with, you know, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. Or, you know, the
Which,
Howling
I mean,
shit.
for the record, I mean, honestly, if you want to really be, I mean, get down to the nitty-gritty about it, that is one of the
Best
worst, I mean, it is. I mean, it's one of the worst movies ever because of how it was put together and what's actually in the movie. But if you can take that and see the bigger picture and see what's really going on in that film, it is the best.
Well, there's a kind of fan commentary that Rob Galuzzo and AJ Bowen did for Icons of Fright a few years ago for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. And there's something that AJ Bowen says in that commentary that really just, I remember listening to that commentary the first time, I'm like, wow, he's totally right. I mean, yeah, like you said, that movie, it's pretty bad, but something that AJ said in that commentary really kind of stood out. There is not a single frame in that movie that Eric Freeman doesn't give 200%.
Thank you.
Every single
Amen.
frame that Eric Freeman is in that movie, he gives everything.
Yes, and
that
that's
is awesome.
Yes, and if you can see that, if you can just really just overlook the shittiness of that film altogether and see what because it is a brilliant performance, because it is this guy in character. I mean, he is that character. I mean, he is oh my god, it's if you've never seen that movie, please seek it out. Take a look at it. It is one of the most bizarre things you'll ever see on film. You'll need Pepto-Bismol after it, but it's great.
And
it is.
Another thing, it's slightly unrelated, but it just popped in my head right now. This is where I'm going to start just in other genres again. I have met 0 people that have said, oh man, that period piece romantic comedy really helped me identify with my child. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My son, Dexter, has autism. He didn't fully talk for years.
Yeah.
It was hard for him to properly convey different things. Through horror films, I mean, obviously I wasn't showing him Martyrs or a Serbian film or a crazy
I Spit on Your Grave, yeah.
Exactly. But through horror films, he came out of a shell. I mean, that kid loves John Carpenter as much as I did.
Yeah.
And it took seeing all these Carpenter movies with him to get him so excited to where he would want to talk. And he would try to use his voice more than usual.
Yeah.
He would come out of the bathroom with toilet paper all around his face and be like, what is going on with you, dude? And he'd be like, I want to be dark, man.
Yeah.
You know, like, horror, that's what, it pisses me off when people discount the horror genre.
Yeah.
The horror genre is so powerful that it has the power to do that. It has the power to really help people, I mean, like I said, with my son, but also internally with themselves.
Yeah.
What other genre makes you face death every single movie? Makes you think
yeah.
about what happens. Makes you think about how you feel about this situation.
Yeah.
Makes you think about how you would react to this. You know, if it's a spiritual movie, you know, makes you kind of think about how you feel about the afterlife, whether there is one or there isn't.
Right.
I mean, how many people have really dissected or written think pieces on A Nightmare on Elm Street and what it means?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I know I've spent this whole podcast talking shit about every other genre, but there will never be another genre that has the power and the effect that the horror genre has.
Especially, and now that you said that, especially the stuff we're talking about now, 80s horror.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but there will never ever be 80s horror ever again. Ever.
No.
It is a...
People try.
It is a move... It is a style of film that is extinct. It is. Mm-hmm. Like you said, people have tried to bring it back. Hello, Lost After Dark, I'm talking to you. You know, there's some movies that actually bring that little tickle back. Hello, House of the Devil, I'm talking to you. That was such a great movie, and it's such a great...
Didn't that movie remind you of that Satanic Panic
yes,
era
yes.
up? Yeah.
I mean, that movie was well put together. You know, Ty West, I give you props. I mean, that was such a great movie.
Yeah.
But there'll never be that ever again. I mean, there'll never be, you know, Return to Horror High. There'll never be another Curtains, another Superstition. That kind of stuff is dead and gone. And I'm so happy that I get to meet people that are dead set on keeping this sort of thing alive, like myself. You know, and that's why a couple years ago, and you know this, I felt that I had to start some kind of club or some kind of little group to keep this kind of stuff going.
Yeah.
And in 2014. Yeah, it was 2014. I started this group called VHS, Visalia Horror Society, and I did it because I wanted to bring people together who love this sort of thing like I did, and keep it alive amongst ourselves. And little did I know, I am on my 4th year of doing it. I do it every month. And it's the same 12, 13, 14 people, but I've created this little tight-knit group that when we get together, it's all we talk about. I mean, the moment we all get together, it's, remember this movie, remember this actor, hey, who was in this movie? Hey, what did you think about this movie? Have you seen this movie yet? And it was proven last week when we were doing that trailer set that just came out that I just reviewed for Motorcycle, and how great something like that can bring out so many memories in people and bring so much conversation to the table.
Joey, you know, one of the members of VHS, he pulled out, like, was it like a pen and some paper at some point? Was writing down trailers that he wasn't familiar with, that he wanted to
and that's
see.
exactly what I wanted in that meeting. I wanted to, okay, let's talk about and let's remember. Oh yeah,
The
Hidden. Let's remember The Mutilator. Let's remember that. But what about like Scream for Help? I don't remember that movie. What about I can't think of another one. The Prowler.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of that one. Let me write it down so I can go look it up later. And what did I just create? A fan.
No, exactly.
You know, and
that set was it 80s?
It's called Trailer Trauma 3 80s Horror-thon. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, it was great. I mean, we spent 2 weeks watching
2
that
weeks.
One? Yeah. It was...
For those of you who haven't heard of that, it's called Trailer Trauma 3 80s Horror-thon. The capital THE definitive 80s horror trailer collection. If you want something that is nothing but 80s slashers and horrors, pick it up. I got it off of Amazon.com. Trust me, you won't regret it. You will absolutely love it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, with you being a horror fan for this long,
yeah,
how is it now that you come full circle and now you like write about it all the time? Because you write about it way the hell a lot more than I do.
Well, what's weird is that whole thing kind of happened out of nowhere. I mean, I grew up obviously loving the horror genre and wanting to write. I mean, that was always my thing. Since I was a kid, I was a writer. I wrote all the time. And, Rob Galuzzo, who was with Icons of Fright at the time, he co-created that site. He gave me a chance, like, hey, you could write for us. And that kind of started, writing for them. And then, Fangoria and then all this other stuff. And it kind of goes like what I was saying as far as, going to that convention with my girlfriend. I've been doing it for a while now, writing for sites and magazines and, going to conventions, covering conventions, going to press junkets, that kind of stuff. And after a while, you try to kind of like stay in touch with what you love about it, but
right.
I mean, it does, at some point, it does kind of become, not stagnant, but at some point, you have to find ways to still be in love with this stuff.
Exactly. I know what you mean.
And, you can only watch so many horror films with... I'm just kidding. I was going to do the cynical. You can only watch so many things without getting annoyed. You can't.
You can't.
You'll never get tired of it. I'm joking, guys. This whole thing's a joke. No. I love the horror genre. I always will. I love writing about it. It's my favorite thing in the world. The most frustrating thing is obviously having to come up with like 40 ideas to pitch to everyone just to see which ones, catch on. But it has come full circle. I love writing about the stuff. I've made, some good friends, people I consider good friends within the horror community and stuff, and it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, you got me into writing, and it's something that I had always wanted to do,
Yeah.
but just never like had a platform or had a way to actually
that's
do
what's
it.
So frustrating is because there's so many great writers out there, and I mean, what great writer? I mean, there's probably like a great writer right now that like will never write for like a good magazine or a site because no one gives them a chance.
Yeah.
I would never be able to talk to, Bill Moseley or all these people that meant a lot to me, interview these people. I never would have been able to interview John Carpenter if it wasn't for people like Rob Galuzzo or Rebecca McKendry, who was at Fangoria at the time. Now they're both with Blumhouse.com. Or Chris Alexander from Shock Till You Drop and all these people. All of these people gave me so many great opportunities and chances that I always try to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, and truth be told, it has backfired a couple times. Sometimes you try to help people out and they kind of forget where they came from.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not being negative. For every one of those people, there's people like yourselves, or there's people like other people who are just passionate and they just need a good opportunity.
Yeah.
And I always try to do that.
Because I've gotten to write for 3. I've gotten to write for Icons. I've gotten to write for Shock Till You Drop, and now I'm getting to write for Motorcycles. So it's for me. It's so great to be able to share how I feel and not feel out of place. Like, I'm not afraid to put out something and fear, oh, well, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. This guy has no idea what's going on. And everything I've ever written, I've actually have met with a lot of positivity, a lot of great feedback. Hey, you know what, Lionel, I did not know that you knew so much about this topic, or I had no idea that you could put together a piece. Like you said, oh my God, the best piece I've ever read about trailers. Because, it sounds like the most boring topic, but when you love it as much as I do, it just happens.
Yeah.
And that I do thank you for. Yeah.
You haven't experienced the flip side to everything. Every year, at the end of the year, every site or magazine does their kind of like top 10 and stuff. And last year, Fangoria asked me to do my top 10 of the year. And there are people that actually messaged me saying that I should die for including certain movies. Like, I will never read another thing by you, and you should die for putting 31
on conversely, that's actually, I mean, it's bad that they actually say that to you.
Well, it's funny.
But that solidifies my theory that everybody has their own opinion. And I think it tickles me when people grasp onto a certain opinion and they just hold on to it. And they don't let any sort of outside influence change that at all.
Yeah.
And I tell people, open your brain to a bunch of stuff. Open your brain, open your mind. You might like some of the stuff you try out.
It never offends me. I think it's really funny. I mean, especially when, I never have opinions that are controversial just to be controversial, but I'm sorry that I like The Exorcist 3 more than the first one. I'm sorry that I don't like Dream Warriors.
Hello.
Like, come on. Let's be honest. That's just how I feel.
That's like my obsession with Sleepaway Camp. People are like, really, Sleepaway Camp? Why?
Yeah.
Okay, one, if you don't know, you don't need to know. Because if you're in the know, you'll love the movie regardless. Mm-hmm. And that's the best thing that I love about doing what I'm doing, especially what I'm doing right now, is getting to talk to people who get what we're trying to do, get what we're trying to say, and embrace everything that has to do with, the horror genre as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, if you love horror, stick with it. Go out, go meet people, go see things, go see movies in the theater. If a horror movie comes out in the theater, especially, go support it, go see it, watch it at home, legally, of course. Yeah. But be active in the whole horror field. Be a part of it.
Well, that's what's kind of unfortunate at times too, is that we're all passionate about the genre, and that's great. That's wonderful. But then there are people that discount other things, and it's like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of like a lot of the newer horror films that are coming out in theaters, but without those movies making money, smaller ones won't make money.
Exactly.
They won't get released.
Yeah.
So don't be so. That's my advice to anyone. Like, don't be so precious about stuff. Like what you like. Don't like what you don't like. And don't give other people crap for liking
exactly.
Or stuff.
Yes, that's what I agree on. Yeah. Well, look, we are out of time. I'm so happy that you came and graced me with your presence at our first podcast. I had so much fun doing this, and we're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. I thank you guys for listening. Go to the Martyrcycle, MARTYRCYCLE.com. Go check out what these guys have written. It's actually really good. Go to Icons of Fright and read some of the stuff that people have put in the past. You're going to find a lot of people who are like-minded like you and have a lot to say. So thanks for coming. Dude, for real, I thank you with all of me. So we will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to the 80s Still Scream. Until next time.